The Pentagon budget is nearly $1 trillion. $1 trillion. It's massive. And by all accounts, it's failed the last 7 audits in a row.
Here's one that I was entirely curious about, and maybe you could explain it to me. $3.5 billion transferred to the Afghan fund that is tended to protect the macro financial stability on behalf of the Afghan people. What the hell does that mean?
Good afternoon, Sean.
Good afternoon, Ben.
Sean, there's a huge fight going on in the US following the inauguration of Donald Trump. And weirdly, the fight is between the Democrats and Elon Musk, who's been appointed, I guess you call him auditor-in-chief. And he's got inside a whole series of federal budgets, including USAID, USAID. And the stuff coming out is pretty horrendous. There's a quick clip which exemplifies the fight and the hatred that's going on in the US at the moment.
That Democrats have to these changes and to asking agencies to open their books. Just quickly, this is from Elon Musk responding to Senator Chuck Schumer and others. It says he's mad that DOJ is dismantling the radical left shadow government in full view of the public. This is our one chance, in caps, to return power to the people from an unelected bureaucracy back to a democracy.
So that sets the scene. The reason I think this is interesting for us, I think eventually this will reach defence. The same, precise nature, the expose they're doing in other parts of the federal government will eventually reach defence. And I no doubt Pete Hegseth will be involved. Just to sort of carry on with the list of stuff, they've done this in public to try and keep the American public on side. Here's Caroline Leavitt, who's the new press secretary for the White House, with her own take on some of the detail.
As the director over that agency, and here's the reason why Elon Musk and others have been taking a look. Because if you look at the waste and abuse that has run through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia.
One of the interesting aspects then for us, in terms of detail, will be what is actually happening that ties it into the defence programme. You're a great believer in when you go into a war, you've got to think about the war. You've got to win in the war. You've got to think about winning the peace. Obviously, Afghanistan is still a major situation where on a sort of daily basis it's not entirely clear what's going on because of the lack of presence. And there's been 2 sets of content here. One is a very interesting discussion between Brian Mast, who's an ex-vet, had both his legs blown off with an IED, serves as a representative down in Florida, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
We are still giving the Taliban tens of billions of dollars. There's an American citizen out there literally woke up this morning losing 30% of their paycheck, and a good percentage of that is going to the Taliban or other programs abroad. And this is something that we all need to think about, and we will be thinking about deeply for the next 2 years. There's a joke that's made often out there about kids going to college to learn basket weaving, and what a joke that would be. But the United States right now is literally sending tens of millions of dollars to the Taliban, 14.9 million to be exact, to teach Afghans how to do carpet weaving. Let's think about that. We are giving $280 million to the United Nations to do cash transfers for food in Afghanistan. Yet we're not sending an ear of corn from Iowa, a sack of potatoes from Idaho, or a cucumber or an orange from Florida. And that discounts the fact that there's no American tonnage going through our ports to send those things out of here either. It's just cash transfers. Another line item, these are directly from CIGAR reports. $75 million to teach Afghan women to be farmers. I don't believe that we spend $30 million in the United States of America to teach women to be farmers. My colleague, Mr. Wilson, brought up that they can't even dance in the streets or speak to one another or go to school, I'm not sure that we can trust that that $75 million is being used to teach them agriculture. And as you pointed out, we don't have any diplomats on the ground to confirm the validity of these programs. Here's one that I was entirely curious about, and maybe you could explain it to me. $3.5 billion transferred to the Afghan fund that is tended to protect the macro financial stability on behalf of the Afghan people. What the hell does that mean? Can you tell me? I don't know. That's a bunch of gibberish to me.
Happy to address all of this, Congressman. Thank you.
I'll give you one more.
Okay.
Before you address it.
Please.
Even worse, by the numbers, we spent $9 billion to resettle 90,000 roughly Afghan refugees here since the fall of Afghanistan. My simple Army math tells me that's about $100,000 a person. That's absurd. So my question for you, we do not even have an embassy in Afghanistan. We have no diplomats there. What are we doing giving them $1?
And a couple of others to add to this, which I've dug up. The US has spent $330 million on teaching females to farm in Afghanistan. It's very difficult for women to exist in any sort of business role, let alone farming. $200 million to build a dam that's never been used. $250 million to build a road that's never been used. So, of course, the big question is, these are huge sums of money that have gone through USAID. Where's the money going? Secondly, there is going to be suspicion the money's gone sort of round and round, and other people have lined their pockets.
Okay, yeah. So I spent 2 years of my life in Afghanistan, 3 tours, and inevitably you've got to win hearts and minds. It was counterinsurgency, and it isn't just a question of the West imposing new roads, imposing dams, stuff like that. Most of these programs, in fact, all of them, to my knowledge, will always work very closely with the government authority to make sure what do they need, and then help enable that to happen. The fact that many of these countries, particularly Afghanistan, has always struggled, and as soon as the Taliban returned, I suspect many of these programs were seen as Western programs, and therefore it doesn't surprise me they weren't used. But unfortunately, that's part of the hearts and minds operation. And I know that the danger, of course, in all of that is quite rightly the West should be accountable. We're accountable for budgets. But grand strategically, once again, political motivation wasn't to find an end state. We went in on the coattails of George W. Bush, having revenge for 9/11. And over time, it became a nation building exercise. And frankly, the Brits, Americans have never been very good at that. So it's not a great surprise that eventually we left tail between our legs and licking our wounds, not only for the amount of money spent, but also the tragic cost of life. And also for those who have left with lost 1 or 2 limbs or more.
Well, we've got a live one going on at the moment in Ukraine, Sean. A lot of money is poured in various forms from different parts of the world. Now, there's a bit of a battle starting to brew. Zelensky, here's a news clip, which unfortunately I couldn't find Zelensky himself speaking, but here's a news clip, alleging what's going on. And there appears to be some sort of disagreement between how much money was given, how much was received, and how it was spent. And Zelensky seems to be taking the opportunity to say, basically, I didn't get it all, so where is it? But I haven't got it.
Where most of the $200 billion in American aid went. Last month, Trump had said, and I quote, "We are in there for $200 billion more than the EU. I mean, what are we, stupid?" Well, according to several media reports, Zelensky has said that Ukraine never received even half of that sum.
One of the challenges, I think, with Ukraine is, frankly, President Trump at the moment is doing something, a bit of theatre, isn't he? Executive orders, and quite rightly, if funding is going to other countries, USAID and the like, people should know what it's being spent on. And I think he's quite rightly highlighting, that some of this may not be what the US taxpayer likes. I think what's interesting about Ukraine is that some of the numbers, I heard a report that President Trump said 200 billion had been spent in Ukraine. I can find no evidence of that at all. In fact, neither can Zelensky, and I can't find any other commentators saying that. Zelensky said that he reckons 66 billion of aid, hugely grateful for that from the US. I don't know what the actual number is because I suspect it takes all sorts of forms. But I think it's very difficult for Zelensky to provide a defensive line when President Trump's actually doing a bit of theatre to make a point. I do think what's fascinating, get below the headlines here, and what's really interesting, I think, is that President Trump clearly doesn't want to continue with just giving aid to Ukraine. And actually what he wants to do now is clearly make Ukraine more accountable. Let's face it, corruption is rife in Ukraine. It's very difficult if you just give money and stuff. It will find its way into different people's pockets. If you make loans, all of a sudden, the Ukrainian government is now far more accountable for that money. And actually what President Trump seems to be making clear is he wants to have security against those loans, against some of the amazing mineral deposits that are underneath the soil of Ukraine. Why is that interesting? It's no coincidence that the tariff wars, America has put tariffs on China. China has been prepared for this, and it's restricting the flow of a whole load of precious metals, 5 of them particularly, that are vital for defense and some of the American technology. So America's now feeling vulnerable because it hasn't got those supplies. If they can find a different way of sourcing them, Ukraine might just be the answer. So I think these are all linked together, and it's all part of Trump's overture at the moment. Let's see how the dust settles before we make judgments on it.
So actually, it could be a bit of posturing then against some other objective or set of objectives that Trump's got.
Well, I think you said before, as a businessman, sometimes you make a statement over here, but actually it's over here that is your intended consequence. And I think, it's Trump's made pretty clear his opposition to the war, but more about the people dying. But I suspect also, given he's got this big push on aid, he doesn't want to pour buckets of money into Ukraine and watch it pouring away into people's pockets just through corruption. I think everyone in the West would support that. Now, I think probably as the war has ground on, Trump's in office, he now wants to make sure the American public know what they're getting for their dollar. It's not unreasonable that he puts a bit of pressure on Zelensky to go, where's this money going? And I want to make sure that you're accountable and we stop the corruption.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, Sean. I think there are rumours that Trump is going to actually close down USAID in its entirety and basically start again. I don't think he minds losing friends of some of the key Democrats, even if it got down to suggesting that some people have actually personally benefited from this. But I think, tell me if I'm wrong, that he's got more of a soft spot for the defence system, and they're much more of a friend to what he's trying to achieve in the future, and therefore maybe he's going to approach the audit of defence maybe in a different way, not so heavy-handed, whereas he might have done with these other systems.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm always nervous about getting too deep into American politics. But I do notice that the Pentagon budget is nearly $1 trillion. $1 trillion. It's massive. And by all accounts, it's failed the last 7 audits in a row. It's the only federal department that has never passed one of these clean audits, which actually is illegal under the American system. So given its massive budget and it's never passed audit, if Trump wants to be consistent, I suspect he's going to have a field day. But unpacking that, working out where the money has gone, I think will be incredibly difficult. And the danger is if you can't just, like he shut down USAID and said, I'm going to get rid of the 10,000 people, I want about 300. And I only want to turn the tap on again when I know where it's going. You can't do that with defense. So you've got to keep defense rolling. So I suspect you're right. It's a different approach, but my goodness, is it ripe for having one of these audits? I suspect Trump will want to get his teeth into it.